She told me I didn't belong. That I was just the daughter of a man she used to love, but not anymore. So while everyone gathered inside for my father's memorial, she made me sit outside like a stray. Humiliated. Forgotten. Powerless. But what she didn't know was that I had something that would flip her perfect little world upside down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I left. Quietly. And when I returned, it wasn't as the broken girl she tried to erase. It was in a black limo, carrying my father's final words. His will. After my mom passed away, it was just me and my dad. We weren't perfect, but we had each other. He tried to be both parents at once, making pancakes on weekends, helping with school projects, even brushing my hair when I was too little to do it right. I clung to him like my only anchor in the world, and for a while, he was. Then she came. Claire. The woman who would become my stepmother. She was stunning, like someone out of a glossy magazine. She had this polished smile and perfect nails and smelled like money and roses. My dad fell hard. And fast. Within a year, she was living in our house. At first, she played nice. She bought me gifts and complimented my grades. But it was all so performative, like she was ticking off a list. I didn't trust it, but I wanted so badly to believe my dad had found someone who could make him happy again. I wanted to believe we could be a family. But slowly, the shift began. My dad started canceling our one-on-one weekends. She'd accidentally forget to save me dinner. When they'd host guests, I was told to eat in my room so the adults could talk. When I spoke up about how I felt, I was told I was being dramatic. Emotional. Difficult. Claire had this way of wrapping my dad around her finger without ever raising her voice. And soon, my space in the house started shrinking. My photos disappeared from the living room. My room was redecorated in a style I hated. She even started referring to me as his daughter when talking to others, never by name. I was still living under the same roof, but I no longer felt like I belonged. It was like being a guest in a hotel where no one wanted you there. I could see what she was doing, how she was peeling me away from my own father piece by piece, but every time I tried to fight it, he'd brush it off. He loved her. And I was just overreacting. That's when I realized I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased. And the worst part, I was powerless to stop it. Claire didn't waste time once she had her foot in the door. She was more than a stepmom. She was a strategist. Within months of marrying my dad, she managed to entangle herself in every corner of his life. She offered to help with the household bills, then with his business scheduling, and eventually with financial decisions. It sounded innocent enough, even helpful, but it didn't take long before my dad started deferring to her for everything. She played the role of the perfect wife in public, always poised, always smiling, but behind closed doors, the control was suffocating. She decided what we ate, who we saw, how holidays were spent. I was no longer part of any equation. Family dinners became her, my dad, and her 2 kids from a previous marriage. I'd come home to an empty table or find out dinner had already been served, without me. Christmas that year was the breaking point. Her kids got new tablets, designer shoes, spa gift cards. I got a second-hand scarf, still with the donation tag tucked under the hem. It wasn't about the money, it was the message, "You're not one of us." My dad barely noticed. Claire had become his entire world. And when I tried to talk to him, just to ask what was happening, why I felt invisible, he dismissed it as teenage angst. "You need to give her a chance," he said. "She's trying." But I knew she wasn't. Claire wasn't trying to build a family. She was trying to build a kingdom, and I wasn't part of it. So I started writing. It was the only way I could survive the loneliness. Journaling became my escape, pages filled with what I couldn't say out loud, the dinners I wasn't invited to, the gifts I never received, the smiles my dad gave her that I used to get. I didn't know it then, but those journals would become proof that I wasn't crazy, that everything I felt, everything I saw, was real. Claire was rewriting my place in my own family, and my dad was too blind, or too in love, to see it happening. Turning 18 was supposed to feel like freedom, but for me, it felt like exile. A week after my birthday, Claire sat me down with a smile that didn't touch her eyes and said, "It's time you start learning how the real world works." She told me I'd need to find somewhere else to live by the end of the month. I was still in school. No job. No savings. Just confusion and a hollow ache in my chest. I went straight to my dad, hoping, praying, he would shut it down. But he wouldn't even look me in the eye. He mumbled something about boundaries and growing up, and how Claire was only trying to help me become independent. I asked him how tossing me out with nothing was supposed to help. He sighed and walked away. That same week, Claire threw a birthday dinner. Not for me, but for her daughter, who was only turning 16. The entire house was lit up, guests laughing, candles glowing on a 3-tier cake. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, unseen, unwelcome. No one had even told me it was happening. That night, I packed a duffel bag and left. I moved into my friend Maya's garage. It was cramped and cold, but it was the first place I'd felt wanted in a long time. I got a part-time job at a grocery store during the week and did food delivery on weekends. It wasn't the life I imagined at 18, but at least it was mine. And even as I smiled through cracked lips and sleepless nights, a quiet fury built inside me. Not just at Claire, but at the man who let her push me out of his life like I was nothing. I found out my father died through a Facebook post. No call. No message. Just a photo of him in black and white, with the words "Rest in peace" above it. I stared at the screen, numb. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. A hoax. But as I scrolled through the comments and condolences, reality hit me like a brick to the chest. He was gone. I called the house. No answer. Texted Claire. Nothing. I even messaged one of her kids, who left me on read. So I did the only thing I could. I showed up. The memorial was being held at a small chapel downtown. I wore the only black dress I had, still wrinkled from being crammed in my duffel. As I walked up the steps, heart pounding, I saw her, Claire, draped in designer black, surrounded by sympathetic faces. She spotted me instantly. Before I could even reach the door, she stepped in front of me. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. I choked back tears. "He was my father." She tilted her head, lips barely moving. "Was. You're not family anymore." Then she turned and walked inside. The door closed behind her. I stood there for a full minute, frozen. I could hear the service begin, muffled through the stained glass. Laughter, prayers, music. And I was on the outside, like I'd always been. Eventually, I sat on the curb, dress clinging to my knees, eyes burning. People walked past, not even glancing at me. My friend Maya pulled up in her beat-up car and rolled down the window. She didn't say anything, just reached over and opened the door. I got in, silent. I didn't cry. Not yet. I had cried enough. But something inside me broke for good. Weeks passed after the funeral. I tried to move on, pouring myself into work, ignoring the hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. Most days, I told myself he hadn't loved me anymore. That he'd let Claire erase me because he didn't care. It was easier to believe that than to wonder what could have been. Then one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, thick, official-looking, with a name I hadn't seen in years. Jonathan Reed, Esq. My father's old lawyer. I tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a typed letter and several folded documents. The letter was direct but kind. Mr. Reed explained that my father had contacted him over a year ago, without Claire's knowledge, to revise his will. He had expressed concern about what was happening at home. He had apologized for how distant he'd become. and he wanted to make things right. The updated will left everything to me. The house, his savings, his business shares, and even a small trust fund set aside specifically for my education and living expenses. My breath caught. It didn't make sense. He never showed any of this at the end. But the truth was in my hands. Signed. Notarized. Official. And then came the kicker, the delay. Mr. Reed had sent several follow-up notices to the family after my dad's death, but Claire had intercepted them. It wasn't until he personally reached out to former contacts of my father that he found me. She had tried to bury it, hide me from the one thing that proved he had still cared. I sat there for a long time, the weight of it all crushing me. Anger, relief, grief. Mr. Reed ended his letter with a request to meet. He wanted to go over the next steps and make sure the will was enforced legally. I said yes, not just to the meeting, but to everything, to standing up for myself, to taking back what was mine. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about truth. And I finally had it in writing. Claire had spent years trying to erase me. But my father, in the end, he left me the final word. The day of the will reading, I didn't arrive in my friend's beat-up car or on foot like the outsider I'd been treated as for years. I pulled up to the estate, the same house I once called home, in a sleek black limo. The engine purred as the driver opened the door, and for the first time in a long time, I stepped out with my head high. Inside, the living room was packed. Claire had filled it with her relatives, her children, her curated circle of supporters, all dressed in black, sipping champagne, pretending to grieve. The moment I walked in, the room fell silent. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Claire's glass hovered in the air. Her face drained of color. "Why is she here?" someone whispered. I didn't say a word. I just took my seat beside Mr. Reed, the lawyer, who gave me a small, approving nod. He opened his folder and began reading. The will was clear. Every asset, every account, every piece of property, left to me. My father's final wishes, detailed and signed a year before his passing. He had known what was happening, and in the end, he tried to fix it. Gasps echoed through the room. Claire stood up, shaking. "This is a joke," she hissed. "This can't be real." Mr. Reed didn't flinch. "It's real. And it's binding." She lunged toward the papers, but two of her own relatives pulled her back. "I was his wife," she shouted, her voice cracking. "He loved me." But love wasn't enough to overwrite the law. And as I sat there, calm, silent, I realized she wasn't just losing a fortune. She was losing the story she had built. The control. The illusion. And I was reclaiming everything she thought she'd taken. Claire didn't go quietly. Of course she didn't. After the will was read, she refused to leave the house. She locked the gates, changed the security codes, and told everyone that the will was fake, that I was manipulating the situation. She even had the audacity to post online about how she was being attacked by her dead husband's vengeful daughter. But I didn't react. I didn't scream or show up banging on the doors like she wanted me to. I let the lawyer handle everything. We filed the proper motions, submitted every legal document, and waited. The court didn't take long to decide. The will was ironclad. Claire was served an eviction notice. She had 30 days to pack up and go. And when she refused again, officers showed up to enforce it. The day she was escorted out, she wouldn't look at me. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching the woman who had tried to erase me be removed from the house she tried to steal. And then, silence. I walked up the front steps slowly, key in hand. I turned the lock and stepped into the house, not as a guest, not as someone begging for a place to belong, but as the rightful heir. The air felt different, lighter. The walls no longer whispered Claire's name. They remembered mine. I had come full circle. And this time, no one could push me out. I could have stayed angry. I could have turned the house into a monument to revenge. But I didn't. The truth is, I didn't want to live in bitterness. I wanted peace, something I hadn't felt in years. So I started with small things. I opened the windows, let in the sunlight, painted over the cold grays Claire had chosen with warm colors, deep blues, soft greens, honey gold. I filled the house with life again. I framed old photos of my dad and me, the ones Claire had hidden away. I turned the dining room into a space where everyone had a seat. And then I did something that surprised even me. I used part of the trust to start a scholarship in my dad's name. For students who had lost a parent like I had. For kids who felt invisible. I wanted his legacy to mean something more than silence and loss. A friend posted my story online, just a short write-up about what happened, what I'd inherited, and what I did with it. It went viral. Suddenly, strangers were messaging me, thanking me for standing up. People shared their own stories of being pushed aside, of being told they didn't belong. Somehow, my pain helped other people feel seen. Weeks later, I visited my father's grave. No crowds. No Claire. Just me. I brought flowers. I told him everything, about the will, the house, the scholarship, the peace I'd finally found. And as I stood there, the wind brushing my skin, I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt free. I thought losing my dad would break me. But the real heartbreak came from how I was erased, like I never mattered. But sometimes, life gives you the pen to rewrite the ending. She locked me out, hoping I'd disappear. But I didn't break. I rebuilt. And when I returned, it wasn't just in a limo or with a legal document. I came back with the truth. Truth that shattered her lies and reminded everyone who I was. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to prove I was never disposable.